the Lord. A great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his head. His tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment it was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up into God and to his throne. The woman fled into the desert to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough. They lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore, rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short." When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the desert, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and a half a time, out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with a torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to make war against the rest of her offspring, those who obey God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. This dragon stood on the shore of the sea. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, as I have mentioned, at times I have a garden, a very nice garden that I'm very proud of. Looks really good this year. I weed it and take care of it, and I'm constantly making changes, rearranging flowers and pulling things out and putting things in and trying new plants in my garden. But one thing that I have that I'm not happy with is I have little holes all over my garden, these little holes about this big. And they are holes that have been made by mice or some sort of mouse-like creature. Probably. Yeah. And I am now at war with them. I have declared war. I am going to get rid of them somehow. I do not know how yet. I haven't figured it out because I don't want to poison them, because I have cats and there's other animals in the area, and I don't want to, there's all sorts of things I don't want to do to these little creatures. But I have declared war because they are waging war on my garden. They're digging up holes all over the place. Yeah, I gotta do something about them. I'm not sure what. Anyway, we are going to talk about being at war with Satan today, because that is what our Bible passage is all about. It's about war with Satan, and this is not a a war that doesn't have a lot of, the war with Satan has eternal implications to it, as opposed to my garden, which is no big deal, the little holes in my garden. So let's take a look. This is a very difficult passage to understand. And so we're going to take a look at it right now and try to see if we can understand it a little better. So it starts out with a woman who is pregnant, and a creature called a dragon tries to destroy her. Now, the first thing is, I want to ask, first question is where have we heard, what leaps to mind about the woman who is pregnant? Well, first off, Mary. Yeah, Mary. That's the first thing that comes to our mind. And it even says in the passage that her offspring are being attacked by Satan. So that sounds like Mary might be also the church of Jesus Christ, and that us believers, faithful believers, we're being attacked. We're the offspring of the church of Jesus Christ. But I also want to lift up a story about Hagar and Ishmael. Genesis chapter 16, you will find the first part of the story of Hagar and Ishmael, where Hagar is a servant of Abraham. She's pregnant with Ishmael, Abraham's baby, and she is being treated very badly by Sarah, and so she flees. She flees off into the desert, and then an angel of the Lord comes down and says to her, "Go back, return to your home. God has plans for your son." And so she returns, and then once Isaac is born, once again, Hagar and her son Ishmael are treated very badly, and once again they flee into the desert. They go off into the desert, and there God comes to them and comforts them and protects them, and then it says to her, "Your son Ishmael will be the head of a great nation." So I look at this, that's what I thought of, one of the things I thought of when I read this passage, because the woman who's pregnant flees into the desert, and she is protected by God. She is protected by God from this monster who's trying to destroy her. So that's one of the ideas, several ideas I get from this vision. And that is that Satan is attacking the church, and that is the offspring of Jesus Christ, the offspring of God, the people of faith. Satan is attacking us, but God protected Hagar, just as God protected Mary and Joseph, and God protected Jesus when Jesus was a baby. God is looking out for us and is protecting us from the attacks of Satan. But still, we are at war with Satan. Now, there's the next image that comes to mind is the dragon. Now, that's an interesting word, because in Hebrew, this word is used, it means monster. And it usually refers to monsters that people have seen in the Mediterranean Sea. Basically whales and other large sea creatures. So sometimes the Hebrew Bible uses the word dragon, which we would translate as dragon, which means monster. But also sometimes it uses the word leviathan, which is also means pretty much the same thing. And so I bring that up, the Old Testament usage of this word, because in Genesis chapter 1, verse 21, God creates dragons. Yes, chapter 1:21. God creates the monsters of the deep. And the Hebrew word to talk about these creatures of the deep, sea, is dragon. Okay, then comes Psalm 74, verse 13. God has power over these creatures that we would call dragons or leviathans or whatever. God has power over them. And so the theme here is that God has created everything and everyone, everything under heaven. And that means God has created Satan. Satan is not God. Satan is a creature, just like you and me. And so we find out that Satan is an angel, and so Satan is just like us, though. And is a creature just like us. And that means God is still in control. No matter what happens or what is happening on this earth, God is still in control. So let's look at this. So this word, this Hebrew word, not only means, the Hebrew word for dragon, that we were just looking at the Hebrew word for dragon. Now we're going to look at the Hebrew word for Satan, because that's also used. It says the great dragon is Satan, the devil or Satan. Okay, so in Hebrew we find the word Satan, and we find it under Numbers, chapter 22. There's the big story of Balaam. Balaam is a prophet from another country, and he is called by a king to curse the people of Israel. And then an angel shows up with a flaming sword to stop him from going about his job, and instead tell him to do God's work, not the king's work, but God's work, which is to bless the people of Israel. The people of Israel. Well, guess what the name of that, the Hebrew word that's used for that angel? It's Satan. Satan is the angel with the flaming sword who tells Balaam, no, you're not going to do this, you're going to do that instead. And so, that word, Satan, is used when it's translated into English, that Hebrew word. Sometimes it comes out as adversary. Sometimes they translate it as accuser, and sometimes it's translated as angel, because that is what Satan is. He is adversary, he is accuser, and he's also an angel. So any one of those English words can work if they don't translate it into the words that we use today, which is Satan. So then, a story you're probably familiar with, Job chapter 1, Satan, the accuser, or adversary or accuser, either one of those words can be used, accuses Job of being faithless. If you challenge this, if you take everything away from this man, he will turn against you. And so Job is tested by the accuser. Everything is taken away from him. Job is faithful. No matter what, Job is faithful. And so there we see Satan as the accuser. In Numbers, he's the adversary, or an angelic adversary. In Job, he's an accuser. Then in Zechariah chapter 3, starting in verse 1, Satan is once again an accuser. He accuses Israel, and if you read Zechariah, you'll see it's using the word Joshua. That's another word for Israel. He's accusing Israel of being sinful, but God rebukes Satan and forgives Israel of its sins. So in the Old Testament, Satan is an angel, he's an accuser, he's an adversary, and he's a creature. He was created by God. So now we get to the New Testament. And in the New Testament, he becomes an enemy. And we see that because in Revelation 12 and 7, in our passage today, Revelation 12:7, starting in verse 7, there was war in heaven. And Satan as the dragon and his followers. And it says that he has friends. He was hurled to earth and his angels with him. So there was war in heaven, and Satan, as well as some angelic supporters, were cast out of heaven. And they're here. They're here on this earth somewhere. And he is active in the world. But it also says, chapter 12, verse 12, his time is short. He knows his time is short, so he's working hard to succeed at his goals because his time is short. And then Jesus, in John 12:31, refers to Satan as the ruler of the world, a very confusing passage because people take it literally. That's not what Jesus means in that passage. What Jesus means in that passage is Satan influences the world, not rules the world. Influences would be a better word to translate that passage. In other words, Satan has a lot of influence over the world, not control over the world. That's because God has control over the world. But Satan has been allowed to influence people. And in Matthew chapter 4, you know the story about Jesus being tempted on the mountain. Satan is the tempter, trying to tempt Jesus into giving up his mission, the mission he's been given by God to do. And then we have, I figured I'd help you with this, one of the most confusing words that I've ever encountered in the Bible. Matthew 12:24 is the story of Jesus, how Jesus is accused of working for Beelzebub. And Jesus says, I cast demons out, and they work for Beelzebub. How can I do that if I'm working for the prince of demons? And so this is an odd word because it never shows up anywhere else. This is the only place it shows up in the Bible, but not only the Bible, but anywhere. And what it sounds like is it's related to Baal, the Canaanite god, Baal Zebul, which means prince of demons or god of demons or something like that. So it seems to be a local word that's sort of an insult. I think that's really what it's meant to be, is they're insulting Jesus by using a term that's you're working for the prince of demons. Yeah, it's more like that. But what tells about it is because Jesus uses the term and he uses the definition. That's what's so interesting to me. Prince of demons. And that's what we encounter in Revelation. Is yes, he has supporters. He has angelic supporters, angelic friends that come with him. So, what does all this mean? The simple meaning is we are under assault by powerful forces, by angels that have been cast out of heaven, that are here among us, unseen, and yet have influence over many people. In fact, Jesus even says he's got powerful influence over the entire world. And that's scary. That really is scary. Now, the good thing about the passage is that it says he's filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. But we don't know what the words time is short means. Because, as you can see, we have different dates in this passage. And they don't seem to mean much to us, like 1,260 days. Well, that was a long time ago, because John wrote this 2,000 years ago. So I don't know what that means. And so time is short is difficult to interpret exactly how long that time is. And that's not my job. As pastor, that's not my job to figure that out. My job is to figure out what the whole of it all means. This passage in view of the entire Bible and what it means to us today. And what it means is, number one, we are under assault, and we are under direct assault through Satan tempting us. That's the first way. That's the way. The first way Satan assaults us is through temptation. Matthew chapter 4, verse 1, Jesus on the mountain. Satan directly confronts Jesus on the mountain and tempts him to turn away from his mission. And Jesus says no. And so that's the first thing. All of us are under a direct assault, but it's through temptation. And we see it today in the scandal that's rocking the Catholic Church. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Catholic Church because I think they need to be reformed and change a lot of what they do. But I have met many wonderful Catholics, and I've worked with priests over the years who I thought were real people who, people who wanted to do God's work. They were seeking to do God's work. And so I've met wonderful people in the Catholic Church. But they're under assault. They're under assault just like you and me. And they're being tempted by Satan just like the rest of us. And some of them fall. Some of them succumb. And so that's why we're seeing this insane news, this constant insane news in the Catholic Church, assaulting the Catholic Church. People have given in to temptation, given in, and it's slowly eating away, destroying their church. But the same thing happens in our churches. We can't be smug, and say, Catholic Church, they're bad, whatever. And they got all these problems, and it's all their fault, whatever. We can't be smug, because we have problems too. Protestant churches, Baptist churches, we have problems too. Not the same problems. Not always the same problems, but the biggest problem that I see in our churches, the biggest temptation that people give into in Protestant churches, giving into the temptation to do anything for success, anything from numbers, bodies in the pews, and money in the collection plate. To do anything for money, to do anything for popularity, to do anything for how we value success. That's what I see is the greatest temptation for a pastor in the Protestant world. Because there's some big churches out there where the pastors are lifted up on a pedestal, and that's how Satan gets in. Is saying, oh, you're great, you're wonderful, you deserve this. You deserve that great car that no longer a Mercedes, Lexus, Lamborghini, how's that? You deserve that Lamborghini, Pastor Bill. I'm going to give you this car as a gift. You deserve that. And the mansion and all this other stuff. It happens. I read about it all the time. I've met people who have succumbed to this. And I know it because you don't just, you just kind of see it. It's not, how as you get to know somebody, the real person starts to come out. You know what I mean by that? You start to see, the more you get to know somebody, the more you see the real person. And then you say, oh, please, no. But that's where so we're under direct assault from Satan and demons. Direct assault. And that's through temptation. Constant temptation to sin, to fall short of the glory of God and sin. And sometimes big things, it could be little things too. Not just big things, but little things. But we're also under indirect assault. Indirect assault. And by that I mean Satan tempts other people to come after us. Other people to come after us. An example, the Apostle Paul, before his conversion, Acts, you'll find this Acts chapter 7, verse 54. Verse 54. He was part of the mob that attacked Stephen, that killed Stephen. He was there. He was an associate. He was part of that crazy mob that murdered a saint of the church, a great preacher, a great teacher, a great believer. He was there. And so the assaults upon us are going to be like that, where we're doing God's work, we're doing God's will, and somebody's coming after us. Because that's also how it works. Satan attacks the church, and Satan attacks believers directly and indirectly. and indirectly is through other people who are saying yes to Satan, who come after us. Our current, one of the discussions with myself and other Baptist ministers are, when is it that one of our churches is going to be sued by an atheist who wants to do same-sex marriages in our churches? We believe this is coming very soon. This is going to happen. And we're not sure what to do about it. We're trying to figure out, do we need to change our bylaws in our church in order to have some sort of legal argument that protects us from this? Or is there some other way? Is there some other way that we have, something else we have to do to protect our churches from this? But it's coming. We can see it, because little by little, there are lawsuits being launched, and there are issues being launched around the country. Little by little, it's coming. And so that's one way that we're going to be assaulted from outside the church. Another way we're going to be assaulted is, and the way that I see that the most common way we are assaulted, indirectly by Satan, our churches, are that we're passive and we don't do mission. That we get comfortable where we are, who we are, how we are. We get comfortable and we stop doing God's mission in the world. We get lazy, we get passive, we stop doing God's mission. And I think that's indirect, that's part of the indirect assault from Satan. Is that at some point, in order to build this church, we had to do mission. The members of First Baptist of Broadway had to do mission in order to build this church up. But at some point, somebody in a meeting somewhere said, we don't have to do that anymore. Why do we have to go out of our way? We don't have to do that anymore. I think that's part of the assault. Is that churches that were once missionary organizations, mission groups, mission-focused groups of believers in Jesus Christ, at some point said, we don't have to do that anymore. We can just kind of do what, we can just sit back and relax and not work to do God's mission. Well, the good news is, okay, so the bad news is we're under assault. But the good news is God protects us. God protects us from these assaults, the direct assaults and the indirect assaults. God protected Hagar and Ishmael. God protected Mary and baby Joseph and baby Jesus. God protects us. And so we have this wonderful passage in the Bible that says, rebuke the devil and he will flee from you. Do you know that passage? Everybody should know that passage and have it in your head. Rebuke the devil, he will flee from you. Just like Jesus did on the mountain. Just like Jesus said, no. And Satan fled. Same thing, because God protects us. We have the power of God with us because of the Holy Spirit. Because God's power through God's Holy Spirit is with us every single day. We can say no. We can say no to direct assaults from Satan. We can say no, and Satan will leave, will flee from us. And as far as indirect assaults, well, we just do our best with those. That's the way I see it, out of my hands. If somebody's coming after me, well, I have God on my side. I have the power of God on my side. Somebody wants to destroy me. Somebody wants to destroy my church. Somebody wants to destroy my mission. I have the power of God on my side. But you know what? It's in God's hands. It's in God. Whatever happens, in God's hands. The church grew, and became strong, even after Stephen was murdered. And